welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're officially pulling the curtain down on part 1 of our story. We're diving right into Act 4, the Geneva Descent. We're going to unpack exactly how our protagonist's violent internal struggle literally tears the fabric of time apart, essentially rewriting history as we know it. So let's jump in. I want to start off with this incredible quote. The world didn't just fade, it shattered like a mirror of truth under the weight of a 1,000-pound hammer. Just think about that imagery for a second. This transition we're about to look at, it isn't a gentle, cinematic fade to black. It's a violent, forced intermission. Reality itself is breaking, kind of like a painted theatrical backdrop tearing straight down the middle under the sheer weight of what is happening inside our protagonist, Sir Brain.
Setting the stage, we have our prologue, the Sublime Prison.
Okay, so our characters are trapped in Victorian London, which has basically become this gleaming golden trap. The elite, what the text calls the law of the herd, they've finally caught the scent of the dark fire pulsing within Brain. As their silver-headed canes start catching the gaslight like executioner's blades, Brain's internal struggle hits an absolute boiling point. The volatile, untamed machine inside his chest is cornered and, well, it's fighting back.
The contrast between these two settings is just staggering. We are abruptly ripped from the glowing gaslight and superficial abundance of 19th century London and slammed straight into the mud, wood smoke, and cold iron of 1500s Geneva. It's a jarring plunge, taking us from a modern world filled with polite executioners directly into an ancient, elemental reality built purely on raw survival.
Moving on to Act 1, the drumming of the heart.
At this exact moment, the human shell of Sir Brain is completely failing him. He's standing right at the precipice, and he is anchored by absolutely nothing except Alara. She's his shadow, his witness, and the story describes her so perfectly as the one drop of oil in his mechanical soul. She's literally the last shred of human connection tethering him down while the rigid, terrifying machine inside prepares to ruthlessly rip its way out. The Hyde persona, the sovereign eye of Big Ben, would not be caged. This right here is where the internal struggle ends. The human side of Brain has officially lost the battle. That clockwork god within him, this imposing, unyielding, ticking consciousness, is seizing absolute control of the narrative. It simply refuses to be trapped by the confines of the Victorian era anymore. Because his clockwork heart doesn't just beat, right? It screams with the overfullness of 1,000 sparks. His iron gears are grinding against absolute ice. It's drumming this private event against his ribs, executing its own timeline that is entirely out of sync with the reality around it. If you think about how disruptive huge technological shifts feel to us today, that sudden, uncontrollable rewiring of how the world works, that is exactly what Brain is experiencing internally as a total system override. Which brings us to Act 2, a violent transitory theater.
Before they actually reach their destination, they have to survive what is essentially a horrifying backstage area of existence known as the Sixth Solitude. They are plunged into this heavy, suffocating silence. It's an absolute biting ice inside a void that knows zero concept of time. Think of it as the ultimate theatrical blackout, completely stripping away the 19th century.
We really need to picture this like a massive scene change in a play, spanning 3 centuries of lost time. First, the actors shed the heavy pack of London. Then, they plunge through the timeless backstage ice of the void. And finally, they violently crash into a completely new set, the rough timber and deep shadow of 1500s Geneva.
The gaslight doesn't just dim for this scene change, it dies. It is instantly replaced by a searing violet roar, a literal cloud charged with lightning. The entire Victorian era vanishes in a violent pulse of raw, unfiltered mechanical energy. The old stage has been aggressively cleared to make way for the new.
And the curtain rises on Act 3, Descent into Calvinist Geneva. You can practically feel the thin, biting air of this new stage. We are suddenly standing on cold cobblestones in the shadow of St. Pierre Cathedral. And it's a harsh world. Interestingly, the real 16th century Geneva under John Calvin's iron hand was so intensely strict that simply wearing jewelry could get you thrown in prison. That physical coldness perfectly matches the severe, unforgiving ideological coldness of the Reformation. But the profound irony of where they landed is just incredible. They haven't escaped their destiny at all. They've landed squarely in the ideological birthplace of watchmaking.
You see, Geneva is already obsessed with a sovereign majesty, a divine, stern clockmaker who brooks absolutely no mechanical errors. So while Brain's clockwork heart is humming a dissonant frequency against the city's bells, structurally, it feels entirely at home in this rigid clockwork ideology. And that leads to this terrifying homecoming. Back in London, Brain was a hunted exile, essentially hiding in the woods. But here, in Geneva, he is a mechanical god waking up right in the forge of history. As he looks up toward those cathedral spires, his groaning seams finally settle into an ancient, powerful rhythm. He isn't out of place anymore. He is just early.
He wasn't a man in exile. He was a cloud charged with lightning that had just found its conductor. The internal struggle we talked about earlier is completely resolved. The machine won. They didn't go back in time to hide away. They went back to forge the very gears that will eventually grind the modern world to a halt.
Finally, we reach our conclusion. Curtain drop, the mechanical seed is planted. Because the dark fire wasn't safely left behind in the 19th century. Nope. At the very first light of dawn, an apprentice watchmaker happens to discover a strange violet-glowing spring lying right in the gutter where our strangers appeared. The mechanical infection of the future has literally touched the soil of the past.
Think about the catastrophic chain reaction that is taking root here. The moment the apprentice touches that spring, his tools begin to vibrate in a rhythmic dance over the abyss. Big Ben's sovereign eye is already bleeding into the timeline. By planting this single seed, Brain is birthing the Empire's clocks centuries prematurely from just one piece of infected metal.
So as the curtain finally drops on part 1, I'm going to leave you with this to chew on. Will the consciousness of Big Ben ruthlessly accelerate history by infiltrating the ancient watchmaker guilds? Or will Alara discover that John Calvin's Geneva hides its own terrifying dark fire deep in the shadows of the Reformation? We're just going to have to wait and find out. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the gears that turn our world.